everybody. Welcome back to Event About It, the Dynamic Dialogue After Show. I'm your host, Megan Martin, and I'm here today with Joe Federbush. And before we dig in, let's remind everybody who Joe is. The president and chief strategist of Evolio Marketing, 20 years of experience in the event marketing industry, has collaborated with leading trade shows like FabTech and CattleCon, which we talked about in the podcast episode. A great show. You guys should definitely check it out. Maybe I need them to sponsor this episode because we talked about it so much. He's also worked with some of the most renowned brands, including Intel, Lenovo, and Novo Nordisk. He specializes in conducting strategic workshops, delivering measurable insights, and empowering events and exhibits to succeed. We're going to get into all of this, but Joe's expertise is return on experience, return on investment, and return on objectives, helping brands achieve meaningful impact. So that is a whole lot of things. So break down for me difference between return on experience, investment, and objectives. We even talked about return on relationships. So that was the other R word we talked in the podcast. So kind of break down the difference of those for me.
Yeah, sure. So it started from years ago, everyone talking about ROI, ROI, ROI. And, ROI is very squishy, can be very nebulous, is very hard to track. Yes, 10 people, what does ROI mean to them? You may get 10 different answers. And ROI is really the outcome. So it's like reverse engineering this, to dissecting it and trying to come up with all right, return on objectives has been around for a long time. Obviously, anything starts off with what are your objectives? But most of us are in the experiential industry, right? And there was no return on experience. And you always hear about like UX, UI, right? When it comes to like app testing or websites and things like that, measuring the experience from like a digital perspective. So I was like, let's measure the experience from an in-person perspective. Um, so looking at things like sentiment, like as marketers, a lot of our success metrics are things that are out of our control, like ROI. As marketers, we're not in charge of sales post-event. That's off to the sales team.
Right.
So I was looking at what are the metrics we can control. And we can start by, of course, identifying the objectives. But then I think, we spend a lot of time as event marketers creating these amazing experiences, or at least trying to. So we say, okay, what's the bucket of metrics that are going to be specifically around return on experience? And those are the things like they're very simple, but like it's just capturing the visitor, the VOV or VOA, voice of the visitor, voice of the
Yeah.
attendee, um, feedback to say, hey, what rate your level of agreement with certain messages, about they don't have to be just very business focused messages like, are you going to buy and things like that, but they could just be like, you the emotional side of things, or ROE, return on emotion, right? And more ROs. But like, did the event accomplish its goals of like, getting people to see your brand, your event, your company in a different light? Are you really like the premier event? Are you creating experiences that are delivering results that are relevant, that are meaningful to the attendees so that they want to take action afterwards? So if your ROI is good or really strong, it's probably because your ROX, ROO is strong as well. But if you don't measure the ROX, ROO, it's hard to tell what worked, what could be improved, things like that.
For sure. One thing I've also always kind of wanted to layer on top of post-event surveys, because a lot of times people don't even fill them out. I mean, I'm guilty of this. Like, I'll never fill out another survey and
The
probably like don't
yeah,
expect an answer from me. But
the
like if you called
85%.
me or interviewed me or something, I'm happy to give thoughts, but like I'm not really going to answer your question. So when the response rates are so low, on some
Mhm.
of the surveys that you send out. I mean, you guys take a very different approach. Like you pretty much ensure 100% participation when you're doing these very targeted responses. But in general, like someone will be like, well, we sent out a post-event survey and this is what it said. And less than 3% of the audience actually fills it out, and less than half of that are the people you actually are targeting for this event. So now you're making decisions off of like, 1% of your audience, which terrifies me because that's not statistically, that's just not a good number. So, what other metrics can people look at to layer on top of some of these surveys and some of the sentiment data to
Mhm.
really understand what the data is telling them?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of pieces to that. One is everything doesn't have to be a post-event online survey because to your point, Megan, response rates are, dwindling over the years because we're over surveyed. Or I think the bigger problem too is it's just those simple things like, is your subject line in that email, is it like captivating? It's not about like what's in it for me, it's what's in it for you. And then the body of the email as well. It's like your opinion matters. This is about you, continuously improving the event so you get the best value for your time and money invested to attend the event, things like that. So it's communicating those key messages in the subject line in the body of the email, where people feel like they're actually part of the event creation process. Now we do a lot of testing of subject lines and messaging and stuff like that, just trying to get people to respond to surveys, and there definitely is a difference. Incentives help, obviously, receive a $10 gift card for completing the survey. I mean, those help, without a doubt, but they're not, those are like kind of like fluffy. It's really more
Sure.
about what's in it for me. I think communications is key, so communicate to your attendees before the event ends, during the event. Remind them, hey, you're going to receive a post-event survey the day after the show ends. We really want you to participate, answer it anonymously so we could, to help shape future shows that meet your needs. I think then back to the question too, is like sometimes, that sentiment type thing, do intercepts on the show floor during the event. So you could get that like kind of one-on-one feedback, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. Um, but intercept people during the show and don't ask all these like tough questions, but questions around, are you enjoying it, what could be improved, are you able to accomplish your goals, what were your goals, things like that, are you aware of. So sometimes through research you can actually build awareness on day one for what's happening on days 2 and 3. um you know so it's a combination of multiple methodologies, in order to like really accomplish the research goals going beyond dwindling response rates.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting, like adjusting on the fly. I have a podcast episode from a couple of weeks ago where I spoke with the guest about like in the ideal world, like what does the future of events look like? And we basically dreamed up this scenario like Hunger Games style, minus all the killing and murdering and stuff. But like there's people in this room that have dashboards with the wearable tech. Like everybody has a smartwatch on basically these days.
Hmm.
And you can see, facial analysis of like, man, people are really starting to look down in the afternoon. Everybody's really tired. What's something we can do really quickly to surprise and delight everyone? Or,
Yeah.
you see them lower on the second day than the first day. So like how do we adjust on the fly continuously and like have this crazy dashboard room of like all the people's like heart rates are escalating or not and facials are getting bored and so these speakers aren't doing it, like put an earpiece in them and tell them to do something funny, right? Like
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
dreamed up this world of like a just like uncon structured conferences where there is, but you have these moments where you can like this session was really great, so let's repeat it on day two because everyone loved it and like here we can see on the screen,
Yeah.
where it was.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much cool tech right now to measure, the attendee satisfaction and delight and all that beyond, like obviously surveys. And I think, it's the key to it is the data storytelling at the end of the day. Like, what are people, because there are so many great dashboards, but like the so what? Like,
Yeah,
what am I going to do with this? What's actionable? Like, and to your point, like, okay, yeah, put a, a bug in the ear of the speaker, like, hey, be a little less monotone, things like that. Speaker training, obviously, things like that, but so few speakers take advantage of it, unfortunately.
agreed, agreed.
But yeah, I mean, there's no lack of data. It's really using the data to inform and inspire change.
Oh, I love that. So you work with some of the biggest brands in the world. What are the smart ones doing with their events to leverage growth beyond just awareness?
Yeah. I mean, they're measuring against their event strategy, which taking a step back, they have an event strategy. Let's start there. And part of that strategy is, and I think this is super key because the most successful companies are doing it, they're first talking to their internal stakeholders to say, what do you think of event marketing? How do you define success? What's most important to you? Going beyond the like, well, we want to meet with decision makers. Like, so does everyone. Like, what does that look like? So first you start off internally creating that plan, getting on the same page so that at the end of the day, when the show is over, you can report back up to management and stakeholders the information that's important to them, not rudimentary metrics, not superficial metrics, things like that. So now you've got that internal buy-in, obviously funding. The more funding you have, the more fun stuff, creative stuff, different things you can do. But I think like portfolio analysis is also important, making sure you're not just doing the same shows year after year because well, we always do that show. Um, keeping it fresh with things shifting in the industry, with costs being the way they are, you know, other things like tariffs, which I knew is, in the big picture, maybe a blip in time, whatever. But
We'll see.
the point is again, goes back to strategy so that when you go and execute all that the time and money you're investing into shows, you're really delivering upon not just like, okay, well, we, show up and throw up kind of thing. It's more
Yeah.
than that, so.
Well, and I think two things you brought that I want to dig in further, but the whole tariff conversation, it sucks. It's costing everyone more money. I totally get it. But
Mhm.
also, this is where I think we learned so much in COVID with digital. And then as soon as we were able to get back in person, we threw that playbook completely out the window instead of enhancing it and just using and adapting what we learned to do that. And I
Mhm.
think this is a time where people maybe need to dust off that digital and hybrid playbook a little bit. Like if the meeting really is going to cost you that much more, there's still ways to accomplish that. And I think this as much as I hate disruptions like this, I also kind of love them because it really forces you to get inventive. It forces you to look at the data and that storytelling of like, okay, how do we still accomplish this, but in a different way? And so again, it sucks. Don't get me wrong. Like, don't come at
Yeah,
me because I'm like,
no,
yay,
I'm with you.
tariffs, because I'm not, because they suck. I get it. Like everything costs more, but it also is so much opportunity in front of us. And we ditched hybrid and virtual so fast
Hmm.
and it kind of broke my heart a little bit because there's so much good that can be leveraged in a full portfolio event strategy, incorporating some of that digital and hybrid stuff.
Yeah,
Anyway, that's my soapbox for the day. But
I'm with
the
you.
other piece that you talked about was getting executive buy-in. So how do we do that? Like as an event marketer, and I know in my gut and the data is telling me this is working, they're capitalizing on sales, the sales are coming through after the show. How do I get that executive buy-in to one, keep giving me budget, and two, giving me more budget to keep up with tariffs and inflation, and even more budget to do some creative stuff year over year?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think it starts off with understanding how do these people define success? Because you talk to a CMO versus someone in charge of sales, they're going to have different metrics that they look at to define success. So it's understanding like how they define success, what are their challenges, what are their pain points, and then making sure that you're collecting the right data so you can report back to them. And it doesn't always have to be good news. I think sometimes the bad news is good news, like to say, okay, yeah, we've always been going to this show. I don't think we need to do it anymore. Or the other thing with costs being the way they are and executive buy-in, being like we're spending what to be in the show, I think you need to flip the script a little bit and to say, well, no, we're not spending to be in the show because it's not return on spend, it's return on investment. But so many people say we're spending X number of dollars. No, we're investing X number of dollars. And if we can get that like mindset from the exhibit coordinator all the way up to the CEO, to say we're investing every dollar we invest in this show, we expect $5 back in return. Now, $5 back in return doesn't always have to be sales or revenue. It could be brand equity. It could be just, hey, we did it better than our competition. Things
Client
like that.
retention. I think so many people
Yeah,
forget about that. Like you sometimes have to go to shows because that's where your customer base is. And if they don't see you there, it's like, well, how come they're not here?
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, there's the FOMO part, but there's also we're dealing with, have you heard of JOMO?
No, tell me about, oh, the joy of missing out.
Yeah, the joy. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, I get a lot of that because
Uh,
I live in small town now and there are definitely shows where I'm like, yeah, no, I don't want to go there anymore.
yeah,
I'm glad I'm
right.
not there.
So it's like, how do you to your point earlier about digital, like, so the joy of missing out, there's two things. Okay, so maybe they're missing out from being there in person, but are there bits of it that are still valuable and equitable online? But the other thing is, how do you convert the JOMO to FOMO? It's like, talk to like the people that are so happy to miss out, which I get, but if you were here, here's what you would have experienced.
Yeah.
So, there's the two sides of it. Travel's up, costs are up and everything, hotels and everything. So we have to be a little more selective in what we're doing and how we're doing it. And honestly, I mean, maybe it's a good time to reboot. There was the post-COVID reboot, and then there's now maybe the just the reboot of the reboot, because personally, I have seen some wasted spending going on. And like, when budgets are being cut or costs are being up, this is such a good time to kind of like rethink and refresh what you're doing instead of just saying, oh, our budget's cut 20%, or even if your budget's flat, it's still cut because the costs have gone up.
Yeah.
So it's like, think about like, well, why are we still doing this? Or why are we sending so many people? Or why are we still printing stuff and bringing it, which is idiotic at this point for most companies and most industries. For some, it still makes sense. I get it. But like, there's so many ways to like cut costs and be more efficient in event marketing.
Oh, I love the it's time to reboot from the reboot because I think the pendulum is finally settling even from COVID, right? And there's still economic disruption going on. So like it's still definitely bouncing more, but I think we're getting closer to a more normal state. And where the way the world operates now is so different than 5 years ago. Like I think I mean, I would love for someone to study just the human behavior change from 2020 to 2025 because it's probably escalated and changed more than any other half decade probably ever in existence. And
Yeah.
human behavior is different. And I think we're all being so much more intentional and selective, not just with our dollars, but where we want to spend our time, how we want to do that. And it's the perfect time to rethink everything.
Yeah. I mean, like leisure was like the big buzz a couple of years ago. I mean, you still hear about the business leisure thing.
Yeah.
So thinking about, especially, you see all the studies, the Gen Zs, the millennials, they really want these experiences and they want to like tie things in. And so it's like, how do you make it, everything doesn't have to be in Orlando or Las Vegas to make it fun, work with the DMCs and stuff. The like wherever, whatever city or town the event is, large or small, to like incorporate the town, the activities, the things that everyone doesn't always see on the strip or whatever, to make it such like a cool time and cool experience that you could tie in with the business side of it as well. Everything doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm at the show from 8 to 5 and then the lobby bar afterwards. There's so much more to a city than that, most cities than that.
Yeah, and talk about return on experience, right? Like give
Hmm.
them something different than the four walls of the convention center. And
Yeah.
even if you do, like there's so much you can bring in to like make an experience even feel local when you can't leave the building.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So
All
yeah,
right,
it could
last
be.
couple fun questions for
Yeah.
you as we're wrapping up. What's the weirdest metric you've ever been asked to measure?
Well, I've been asked to measure some weird ones and I shoot them down and I say, why? What are you going to do with this? Um, God, I can tell you one metric that I was like, please don't do this again. One of a company's success metric, their most important KPI was the number of cups used at their coffee bar in their booth. And
Did they relate that to how many people were coming through?
I don't know what was going on there, but when we were having the measurement conversation, like, well, our current KPI that the everyone loves is how many cups are being used in the coffee bar. And I said, and I like literally we were on like a Zoom or Teams or wherever, my face was like, oh my God. And like, Joe, I know that's not the best way to measure. And I'm like, "Ah." And they're like, because sometimes cups get stuck together. And I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's why it's not the best way to measure. Like, no. So there are certain things like, were the cups branded? Was your logo in the foam? Was your name on the napkin? Like, what makes this successful? And to your point, like, well, it helps us understand our traffic. And I'm like, no, it helps you understand how many coffees you give away. Because what are you doing with the traffic? And like, well, we don't want to bother people and we don't want to seem pushy. And I'm like, you're not Starbucks. So don't pretend to be Starbucks. You're not. But
That's
yeah, we get a lot of these like rudimentary or like superficial kind of vanity metric requests
sure.
that you know, that's that balance between like no and all right, well, let's work around this. And but it's like anything, you want to inform and educate. So when people realize, oh, you know what, that's not a that's not a great metric, but here's what I suggest. So you kind of like shift the conversation, then they see the value and okay, we could do it better.
Reframing the
Yeah.
conversation. And I love the why question. I do that all the time. And they're like, we need this graphic or we need to do this in our CRM. And I'm like, let's back up for a second. Before we go through all this work and do all of this, like, what are you even gonna do with it? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I can do that for you, but like why? Why are we
Mhm.
doing this? What are you hoping this is gonna do for you? And most of the time after that, and they're like, okay, well, never mind. Like, we really aren't going to actually do anything. I was just curious. I'm like, you can pay for curious, that's fine. But like,
Yeah.
it's a waste of time when we should be focused, maybe over here looking at this.
Yeah, I mean, we literally like audit every objective to say like the first of all the why, and then the what are you going to do with it, and then how are you going to collect it. So those three, like the simple how, what, and why kind of stuff. But like, yeah, when you really break it down that way, it becomes an interesting conversation where they're like, oh wow, and I'm like, that would cost money to get you a vanity metric that's not really actionable or helping you achieve your goals. So. And most are pretty logical and sophisticated with what they're measuring and why. But yeah, sometimes you get these curveballs.
Yeah, how many cups of coffee did we get? Not coffee, just cups did we
Just
give out?
becomes
Yeah, it's all right. All right, what's one thing event marketers still don't understand about measurement and metrics?
that it takes time and money. I think, and this is sometimes why I guess those goofy metrics happen, but like, because, oh, well, it's free to do those. I think, executives, event managers, every person in between. Yeah, measurement's important, more important than it's ever been because of the issues, because of the cost, because of proving value, all these things. But yet they're not dedicating the resources and time and budget to measure effectively. And when budgets get tight, ironically, one of the things we see that gets cut is measurement as like a first cut. And like that should be your last cut because so and I don't mean that selfishly because of what I do for a living. I mean it because like you're in a state where you have to justify every dollar being invested, not spent. And you're cutting measurement, but you're putting more money into like shirts, like boot staff shirts. Like, come on. Um,
Yep, I feel the same way. Like that should be the last thing because that is the calculator to understand where we need to make things better. And so
yeah,
you're cutting out the foundation of a house to put in a fancy kitchen.
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no roof, but we have a kitchen.
Right. Makes no
Yeah,
sense to me.
so that's the one thing we see quite a bit, and it's unfortunate. And like to your point earlier, there's so many ways to measure. They can be super expensive. They could cost nothing, but they take time and planning. So it's like really understanding what's important and how you're going to achieve it.
Yeah, I love that. All right, last question. If Evolio had $10,000 for a booth at a show, how would you spend it to make the most impact for the company?
So great question. I would, practice what I preach basically, and I would do a lot of due diligence to say, okay, who's the attendees? How many of them are there that literally meet my target audience, my target market? Develop very curated messaging that's going to be relatable to them. So I'm not worrying about that there's 10,000 attendees. Maybe it's 2,000 that really represent my target, which means I got to talk to the show organizer and ask lots of questions and demand the answers if they want me to be in their show. That's the first step, the planning side of things. So then we show up, have the right kind of booth staff that knows how to engage. You can have an ugly booth with amazing staff. And if that staff is energetic, inspiring, informed, educated, knows how to work a booth, that's really what matters. So I would put the time and resources into staffing accordingly and just making sure that whether it's just a 10 by 10 with a backdrop, it just says what we do. Doesn't tell you how we do it and why we do it. And Like just what we do, and not what we do because we care what we do. It's what's in it for you. So it's the right staff, the right planning with the right message. You do those couple of things because people are going to walk by regardless, you know. So if you have the right people standing at the edge of your booth saying, "Hey, look at your badge. Hey, Megan," you know, not a yes no question, not a closed question, but an open question. How are you how are you defining the success of the events in which you invest in? You know, and like it's just those simple things, you know. Yeah, maybe a memorable giveaway is nice, but it has to be memorable, like something people would really want, and maybe you have to do something special to get it. But you know, the candy bowl, I mean, like all these weird things, these basic things we see in 10 by 10s, need to do it better.
Well, and in the age of sustainability, I think swag could talk about reboot on reboot. My gosh, let's rethink swag altogether.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
some shows, especially in the events industry, that I've been to, and I was warned ahead of time before going to ones in particular. They were like, people only come for the swag. That's it. And I was like, there's no way. Like, who still comes only to collect swag? And they were not kidding. There were ladies walking around with like massive bags, just like collecting all of this swag. And can you imagine? And it was around Christmas time. Like, I can't imagine like being a little kid and like dumping out my stocking at grandma's house or mom's house or whatever. And it's just like full of event industry swag. Like that's
Mhm.
what and that's literally what they were doing with it. It blew my mind. I couldn't believe the amount of stuff. And they would only have a conversation with you like 5 seconds. I'm like, just take the swag. Like you don't actually care. Like
Right.
just leave my booth so I can actually talk to someone who's here to like have a conversation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the trick-or-treating thing, like, you know, fortunately, those days are numbered and those
Thank
shows that are
God.
like the attendees are coming for that. But you know, the flip side of it is like, okay, sounds kind of annoying, but like, you know, so how do you use that to your benefit? So um, you know, use then like have some kind of swag to your point that's sustainable, that's going to be memorable, you know, if that's the thing. Like I forget where it was, some show I was at, they were giving away pencils. And the pencils, you know, they were wood and, you know, whatever. But at the end of the pencil was like a seed packet. And you could plant the pencil in the ground and create a plant when you were done with the
It's kind of
pencil.
cool.
Yeah, if you keep a pencil that long. But like, I mean, for all the handwriting we do these days, but still, like the intent is pretty cool that you know, like to think of it through that way. And it was a really nice pencil, you know, but it's a pencil.
I mean, there's woodworkers in my family. In my house, we go through a lot of pencils. Like,
Oh, there you go. All right.
so like I would actually take a pencil.
See, but that's the cool thing, and you'd remember it. Like I remember it, and this was a few years ago. Do
Yeah.
I remember who did it? Unfortunately, no. But you know, they. So how do you make it memorable?
No, I love that. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, have a great day.